Fast Forward Productions. The women are speaking.
This is Initiated Survivor, where we share survivors' voices and our stories of recovery and reclaiming our power. I'm Kelsey Harper. I'm a clinical psychologist and a survivor, and I like to share helpful tips and skills about recovery from trauma. As a community of survivors, we have tremendous power to change the world, so thank you so much for being here. Here we discuss stories and information that is relevant to survivors of gender-based violence and sexual violence. These topics may be triggering and are for adult ears only, so please be mindful of your needs throughout. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Initiated Survivor. I wanted to do a final Ask a Psychologist Anything with one question that I get asked quite a bit by my clients, by people that I meet, people I talk to, friends, everyone, which is how do I get my fill in the blank to go to therapy? This could be, how do I get my partner to go to therapy? How do I get my mom to go to therapy? How do I get my sibling? How do I get my coworker to go to therapy? And so I'm here to answer that question. This is a really common question because by and large, the vast majority of people asking this, they're not asking because they want their family member to go into therapy because they're the problem and they need to see that it's their fault, but actually because most people are experiencing a tremendous amount of relief and healing and getting access to a lot of deep empathy and compassion and validation, and know how valuable that is and how strongly that has really repaired them. And they're wanting that for their loved ones. They're wanting their loved ones to be able to have access to healing, to repair, to be able to be held in an empathic space with compassion, not to just blame them or force them to change in some way. They're wanting this type of healing and repair work for them. So how do we get our loved ones to go to therapy? Oftentimes we're asking this question because our loved ones are not going to therapy when we think they could really benefit from it. They obviously know that it exists. Maybe we've invited them. Maybe we've suggested it over and over and over. But how do we get them to finally take that step? And the very short answer to this is you don't. It's understandable how much you want your loved one to get help, to get support, to be able to change, to get some relief from pain, to change in a way that doesn't create shame and guilt, but actually maybe is more empowering or helps them feel more connected to themselves. And for many people who are asking this question, this is a method that really worked for them to be able to do that. But the short answer of you don't try to make your family member go to therapy. You can't get them to go to therapy. You can't convince them. You can't cajole them. You can't do any of these things is more because of a couple of reasons. Therapy is one way to achieve all of those things. There are many variety of ways for people to access and connect to healing, to empathy, validation, a sense of connection, to be able to make changes in their life and in their behavior that they want to see. And therapy is just one of those ways. There are many other ways that we do that, connecting with our friends, our community, our family member, engaging in self-reflective practices, getting feedback from people, all of that kind of stuff, like are all ways that people do this. And that there might be ways that are, one, much more accessible for other people than therapy. Therapy is not that accessible. It should be. It absolutely should be a human right. And it just isn't. You know, with the healthcare system in the US, with the healthcare system across the world, mental health care is something that is out of reach for a lot of people because it is not effectively funded and supported. So it may not be accessible, but it also just may not be the method that really works for people. It may not be accessible also because there is still a lot of bias and prejudice in medicine and in all healthcare, and that includes therapy. And so we can see that a lot of therapy providers are continuing to work on dismantling their own internal bias and prejudice. And there are some therapists that are not doing that work, are not interested in doing that work, and are actually using therapy and their connection to their clients as a way of perpetuating and supporting their own bias and prejudice, or, really spreading the information that they believe is valuable around that bias and prejudice. And so it may not be accessible also because it may not actually be something that would be helpful for them. There are a wide variety of ways that are culturally congruent, that connect people to communities that aren't therapy, that will help people heal and change. The other thing that's really important to consider here, this is one of my strong ethical values around providing therapy, is dignity and autonomy, and respecting the dignity and autonomy of other people. And so that means that when we're respecting the dignity and autonomy of other people, respecting and honoring their agency, that means that we're allowing them to make their own decisions. And not just allowing them to make their own decisions, we're not presuming that we know what's best for them and that therefore we need to convince them to change their mind, change their actions, change their life plan, and engage in some sort of work that worked for us. Part of that is on one side, like, we don't know everybody's life. We don't know what's happened, what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they've gone through, what they need, what would work for them to help them recover and heal. We also do not get to speak for them and demand that they change or that they heal or that they change in the way that we believe that they should. And so when we can get to a place of not just radically accepting that we can't make people change, that we're not in control of other people's decisions, feelings, actions, but also that there may be a value that is really, really important to hold in integrity around honoring somebody else's agency. And that includes all of the things that they want for their life. Therapy and recovery might not be one of them. And that we respect that decision as valid and legitimate and just as valuable as the decision to go to therapy or go to treatment and get help. And that can be really, really important to look at, that when we are getting really fused with the sense that I need my family member, I need my loved one to go to therapy, how do I get them to do this? That we can come back to that value around how important it is to really honor and respect people's individual decisions, people's capacity to understand themselves and to reach for what they want to. The ways that we can support people in this, when we're looking at, like, we're wanting to support them with their health, their recovery, with reaching their goals, whatever that is, it might actually look like doing the things that can make options accessible to them. So some of the first things that we can do around making options accessible is just helping them learn and understand what options are available there. For a lot of people, they don't know that it's possible to feel differently, or to value themselves, or to feel a sense of connection and respect and community, to feel a sense of purposefulness, to be able to experience joy as well as sorrow, to be able to have things that matter in life, or to also feel a sense of power and advocacy and community around making changes and pushing for change and resisting the way dominant oppressive forces are enacting things in our lives. Sometimes people literally don't know. A lot of that can have to do with generationally, like just not having access to care, as well as there being a lot of stigma around receiving mental health care and what it is, as well as not necessarily knowing what going to therapy can look like, but also not necessarily knowing that it's possible to go through a process that can make life better. Part of that is also just helping engage people in a conversation about what they want for their lives. Maybe they don't necessarily want to feel better, but they want to feel more motivation. They want to feel that they can take action on these things that they're seeing happen in the world that are causing them a lot of pain, a lot of hopelessness. Maybe they actually just want to live a quiet life where they're able to create space from the things that are really scary and harmful and live their life and focus on that. What are the resources that can get them there? Therapy is one. A lot of different types of community action and connection, skill building, all of that are all possible ways of getting there. Just asking them more about what it is that they want and helping them understand that there are options. One of the ways that we help them understand, or help people understand, the options that are available to them is by telling them about our experiences. It's really important to tell them, though, about all of the experience. We don't want to cherry pick and just select the positive things about our recovery. It is important to talk about that it is hard and it is painful, and be very radically genuine about, why did I decide to continue doing this recovery work, even though it was painful, even though it is really hard? Were there times that I worked with therapists that weren't really helpful or effective, or actually did some harm? And what did that do? What was that like? And how did I change? How did I know I was working with a therapist that was really helpful and effective? And how did that work match with me? How do I know about therapists that do different styles and approaches that don't work for me, but maybe work for my friends or for other people in the world? And how do we understand that? How do we know that? And sharing our stories about our own recovery and the way that therapy played into it can be really powerful at helping people feel like they have that option available to them and that it might be something that's possible. Also, being there to genuinely answer any questions people have, as well as responding to some of those maybe negative core beliefs that they have without taking it personally. And if you feel like you can be there without taking it personally, asking about that and helping them challenge some of those beliefs. The other might also be talking about all of the things that you're doing in your life that are a part of your recovery. Therapy is just one. With all of my clients, with myself, all of my friends, all the people that I know that are trying to make change in their life, trying to heal or recover from something, or using and accessing support in some way, shape, or form. That is one of many things that they are doing that are a very clear part of their recovery. Just inherently, naturally, we're going to take things from therapy and take action in our life and do things differently in our life. And then maybe report back to therapy, get feedback, reflect on it, just understand it a little bit more. We're going to be doing a wide variety of things that support us in our recovery. When I talk with people about trauma recovery, oftentimes people are expecting for the conversation to revolve completely around therapy and mental health work or medical care, and or sometimes some sort of involvement with justice systems. And when I look back on my own story of all the things that I did, it actually really opened up all of the resources that we do have available to us that can be helpful for people if we're willing to validate them as legitimate options for healing and recovery. Things like working with spiritual leaders and connecting with spiritual groups, doing things that deeply connect us with families, setting up boundaries with our families, connecting with different people out in the community and seeing if there are communities that feel like a good fit to connect to, belong to, practicing that radical genuineness, expressive arts and expressive creative ways of engaging with trauma processing, breath work, somatic-based type of things, body work. In many ways, when we are surviving trauma and recovering from trauma, everything that we're doing is a trauma recovery intervention and can be incredibly powerful and helpful. So also when we're sharing with people that we think they could really benefit from some help or from connecting to support or they would like to, it's also good to be clear about all of the different things in our lives that were powerful and helpful. Again, because we're wanting people to see and understand what options they have and how to go about it. The things that you're going to want to avoid when you're wanting a family member or a loved one to go to therapy is pressuring them, like repeatedly bringing it up, telling them they need to do it, making it the answer to every single issue they have. Like, oh, well, you could do that if you go to therapy. You could do that if you go to therapy. One, we don't know that that's true. We don't know that they could do that if they go to therapy. We don't know if they're going to feel better about that if they go to therapy. We really cannot guarantee any of those things. We don't know that even if the therapist they go to is the right fit for those issues. We do not know. So answering in that way and continuing to pressure them of like, you should go, you should go, you should go. Why don't you try this? Why don't you sit in with my therapist? Right? Can be unhelpful. Also avoiding blaming them for their issues. Well, if you wanted to change, you would change. If you wanted to, you would go. If you wanted things to be better, you would go to a therapist. Blaming people for their issues gets us nowhere. It's very much like victim blaming. And it's important to look at that as sharing a lot of the qualities with victim blaming, that it is actually out of protection of a larger system that doesn't want to change. It's benefiting from harming people rather than actually helping a person motivate into getting their needs met. The other thing is presenting them with lists of people that you've looked up and researched for them or doing that research for them. If they have not explicitly asked you for help in that way, that can feel incredibly pushy, intrusive, invasive. We also don't know what people are looking for. Some of the ways that you can be helpful is just offer some support. If you want help figuring out how to get some support in this way, I'm here. If you want help on how to search for and find a good therapist, I can definitely help you with that. I have some good tips. Here's how I found mine. If you want, I can ask my therapist for referrals for who you're looking for. If you're looking for something similar to mine, let me know. If you want me to go with you to a meeting, to a 12-step meeting, if you want me to go to a support group meeting with you, if you want me to go to this new organization or community that you're trying out so you're not there by yourself, that can be a wonderful way of helping somebody get connected to support. Giving them feedback when they ask for it. Unsolicited advice is oftentimes experienced as really invalidating and harmful, and oftentimes can feel very much like a projection. Ask yourself why you need to give somebody unsolicited advice about who they are or what they're doing wrong when they're not asking for that information. What is it that it's doing for you? And maybe actually just address that issue directly, but be open to offering them feedback if they want it. If they're like, hey, I keep having this issue, I don't know what's going on, you can ask them, do you want some feedback? Do you want to just have some space to vent? Do you want some comfort, validation? I've got all of those ready for you, whatever it is that you're wanting, and helping support them with whatever it is that they are wanting and they're looking for. The other is that's really important to keep in mind when thinking about how do I get my loved one to therapy is to really dig in for yourself about what it is that you're needing that is bringing that question up. Is it a feeling that our relationship will get so much better if they were in therapy, if they were working on these issues? Is it that I want them to be in less pain? Their pain is hurting me. I feel so much empathy and compassion. Seeing them in pain is really hurting me and it's causing me pain. Is it that there's certain behaviors that need to change that you understand are complex and difficult and you're worried that they're not going to be able to do it, and that if they don't change those behaviors, something bad's going to happen to them or to you? Really look at any of those things that are coming up around why am I wanting this person to get therapy, and bring that to your therapist, bring that to your friends, get support around that. Start to understand, how can I grapple with this? How can I address this? How can I meet this need? Get support around this in the absence of this person doing exactly what I think they should do. Just because we believe that therapy is going to be helpful for them, it may not actually result in the outcome that we're looking for. Practicing a lot of radical acceptance that we don't get to control or get to decide the outcomes is really, really important here too. Because if we get very focused and fixated on this person needs to go to therapy, that's going to solve this problem in our relationship. And that person goes to therapy, and maybe through therapy, they decide they're not going to change any of their behaviors. They don't want to, they don't need to for their values. It doesn't make sense to them to do that. They went to therapy and it didn't actually improve the relationship. And so when we let go of outcomes of like, I need the relationship to change by way of changing their behavior in order for things to be okay, we can also move to what other options we have. If this relationship cannot sustain the way that it is right now, unless those behaviors change and that person's not changing behaviors, I also have the option of ending the relationship, of changing it to a different kind of relationship, taking distance in space, setting up boundaries. And those are things within my power to do. When I'm feeling like somebody else's suffering is causing me pain because I'm having that deep compassion or empathy wound from being with them and supporting them through this, what is it that I need in order to be able to act in the values that I have around supporting my loved ones through pain? It's possible that I'm feeling overwhelmed with their suffering because I'm not practicing boundaries to take care of myself. That doesn't mean that we tell people that they need to take their issues elsewhere or that they need to manage these on their own, but it means that we need to be much more diligent about taking care of ourselves, taking space, being unavailable when we're unavailable, and being very available when we are very available. The other is also acknowledging and accepting and bringing in emotional boundaries. What is happening to our loved one is not necessarily happening to us. It's not about us. We can care for them and love them and feel sadness for them and do things to take care of all of those feelings without making it about us. And that's where having our own support can really help with that as well. And also enable us to be a good loved one to them and being able to support them and be there for them through what they're going through. Now, one of the ones that people I think get the most worried about or the most concerned about is when their loved one is engaging in behavior that we fear will be life-threatening. Maybe they're engaging in addictive behaviors, very erratic behaviors, self-harm behaviors. Maybe they talk about depression and suicide. We're very, very terrified. We're very worried about them. We really want them to get to therapy. It's important to really balance those values around agency and autonomy and respecting people's agency and autonomy and honoring dignity in that, with also being very clear with them what our concerns are. We can reflect to them, hey, I see this happening and it worries me. Hey, this is the road that I think you might be on. Can I help you get to some support that might make that change? and accepting if they decline that reach for support, and being clear about what your boundaries are around when our loved ones decline life-saving support or what we believe would be life-saving support. And also making sure those boundaries are set up in place that enable us to be able to stay in that relationship if we can, because ideally, like, we're still going to be there while they're going through their process. And as soon as they're ready to make a change in a way that can help save their life, we're there to help support them. We're there with the resources to do that. We want to definitely do that as much as we can for our loved ones, if that feels appropriate. That does not feel appropriate, then it's important to create those boundaries for yourself and see if you can connect them into other people that might be more supportive for them. But again, coming back, how do I get my loved one into therapy? You can do all that you want to. You can do all that you can. Try not to pressure them. Radically accept that you cannot make people go to therapy, and take care of the need that's coming up for you, while offering a lot of just respectful space for folks to make decisions for themselves and for their lives and what they want. I will see you soon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Sam Valentine and her team at Fast Forward Productions for editing, producing, publishing, and all-around podcast magic that makes this podcast possible. If you found something that resonated with you, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. This simple but meaningful action really helps increase the visibility and accessibility of this podcast to survivors and allies that may be looking for some support and connection. I love connecting with listeners and allies, so please feel free to share this episode on your socials and go ahead and tag me in it at Initiated Survivor or at Kelsey J. Harper. A final but very important note: while I am a clinical psychologist, this episode and this podcast does not constitute professional mental health care or therapy, nor is it a replacement for professional therapy. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The podcast host and the guests are not rendering professional advice and should not be considered to have developed a professional relationship. If you are looking for mental health care or professional help, please seek it out. We have some links in the show notes that may help you with that, or you can contact your insurance carrier directly for referrals.